All right, guys. Today I got Nick DiMarco here with my staff as usual here. Um, came through Coach DiMarco. Heard about him obviously, and I've heard a lot of great things about him. But Cam Joss, one of my close friends and kind of colleagues in the industry, is one of our mutual friends and one of the guys that we both have bounced ideas, back and forth many times. So I haven't ever actually met Coach DiMarco, but I feel like I know you really well just based off of how many conversations I've had about you. Um, and you've inspired a lot of some of the things that we even do here just based off of conversations I've had with Cam and um, done a lot of things with that as well. So just those of you who don't know Coach, he's incredibly at what he does. His willingness to share is next level. And right before we got on, he just literally emailed me his entire program, which not very many people are willing to do, and I didn't even ask for it. So that's just show you what kind of guy he is. But um, graduated from William and Penn, right, Coach?
Yeah, really
And then
crappy
going
NAI
into
school.
senior year, you interned at Iowa.
Yep.
Went and bounced around the NFL for a while,
Yeah,
and then
not very long.
Iowa.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then went back to Iowa in January 2015.
and then Elon ever since.
Yep. 2018 of March on.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I say this all the time, we were actually just talking about this with about Phil Matus yesterday, just about how cool it is that he's gotten to sit under Mickey Marotti and just learn everything and now step into a role of director at Boston College. But
Mm-hmm.
getting to learn over one of the guys who I think is one of the best in the industry, Chris Doyle, um, having that experience and being able to be an assistant and develop under him. What was that like for you? And what did you do to make sure that you didn't waste that opportunity as the assistant of making sure that one, when you got the nod to be a head guy one day, you were prepared to do it, but two, that you really absorbed as much as you could from him, and how has he shaped your philosophy and just kind of that whole realm?
Yeah. So it started with my internship experience, and really I interned there because I knew that they only hired former assistants or former interns
Yeah.
as assistants. So I was like,
Yeah.
if I can just go in, be the best intern, I can maybe lock down a spot in this profession at a place that I definitely want to work at, just because Coach Doyle's the man. And I really, no offense to any other coaches, I just don't think there's a single coach out there that you can learn more from on how to be a director of a department, or even just a director of a football staff. There might be other places that are better connected as far as getting an FBS job quicker, things of that nature. Like you go to LSU, you go to some of these SEC programs where assistant coaches and OCs become head coaches all the time, you can get a good job. It's probably the easiest path to a big time job. But if you want to truly learn how to be very good at your profession, there's no one better to learn from than Coach Doyle, in my opinion. He's got pretty crazy experience level himself, and there's not many people outside of like him, Coach Moffitt, Coach Manny, who just retired, who have been at one place and
Right.
been able to sustain success in that place. And there's no one higher paid for a reason. If you look around at the schools who have the biggest budgets, they still don't get paid as much as him, just because the value that he brings. And you don't get paid for your resume. You get paid for the value that you bring. And you can bring a lot more value outside of just programming and things of that nature. How you run a program, build a culture, and truly develop kids for a 5-year process is kind of our real value. And Coach Ferentz, the head coach there, truly values it, doesn't just give it lip service because it's shown in his salary. It's shown how the way the program is run. He's not down there micromanaging anything. When we're in the off season, Coach Dole's the head coach, and as it should be, in my opinion. You spend the most time with the guys. But just as far as the first thing that struck me right away as an intern, we have a pretty extensive internship curriculum there where you're reading about a book a week. You have to coach movements every single week. So it might be, hey, teach us the back squat progression. And you're teaching the assistant coaches who there's kind of one standard way. Everyone's on the same nomenclature and speaks the same language. And so they know exactly what you're looking for. And it's a lot tougher environment, in my opinion, to coach to those guys than it is to coach freshman athletes who have no clue what they're doing because they think anything you say is kind of the gospel. So I think just getting that exposure of coaching in front of groups, or coaching in front of those coaches,
Right.
is a huge ability to just improve your detail and your ability to coach things.
I like that.
Outside of that, like I said, just being a lifelong learner on your own, like not trying to get spoon-fed everything. Coach Doyle is the highest paid guy and everyone knows him, but the guy reads all the time. He's always trying to learn. He's always trying to talk to other people, kind of progress what he's doing. He's never stagnant, even though he could have every reason to be. So just being a lifelong learner, always trying to read and better yourself, read, have conversations, experiment on yourself, etc. And then going into the assistant role, for me, I always thought a lot of people are so worried about that next job versus just being really good at the job you have. And if you don't bring value to the head coach that you work for, they're not going to see you as a valuable person, no matter what you think. So even if it's not everything, say our philosophies differ on a certain thing, if I know what he wants as a head coach, I'm going to try and think of ideas that fit his needs and can move our program forward. Because the more value I bring to him and bring to the program, the more valuable I am as an assistant coach. And just trying to be the best assistant you can be, because, you can know all the people in the world, but if you know one person who will put his fist on the table for you and say, you need to hire this guy, that's all you really need. No one cares if you have 10 references. You just need one really good reference who knows and cares.
Yep. What was one thing that you got to Elon and it just seemed like a really smooth transition that you were like, man, I feel like I've been doing this my whole life. Like I was really prepared to do A. And then what was one thing that you were like, man, this is something that I wasn't quite ready for, this, whatever that is, of being a director? Like what was one thing that you killed, and what was one thing that you look back and you're like, man, I wish I would have, as an assistant, I wish I would have prepared differently so that I was ready for that?
Yeah, I would say, going in, the thing I did best was, especially if you're in a director role and like my role, I only work technically hands-on with football. A lot of people come in, they're so worried about only football. Versus for me, I was like, there's 15 other teams who I think are getting trained pretty poorly. I think the football team had good training prior, because that's the position they cared to hire the most.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to have a conversation with every single coach when I got here. I sat down and met with every player on the football team when I got here, because everything starts with having good relationships with people. And that was something I took from Coach Doyle of, don't just come in and bark at people and tell them what you're going to do. Kind of meet in the middle and have good conversations with these coaches, and get to know the athletes. Like, it's just weird coaching people if you don't know their name and you don't know anything about them. So definitely don't worry about the perfect program. Worry about teaching and getting to know people first. Would probably be something I thought I did well. Something I struggled at, I inherited a staff that I'd never worked with, and I was probably a little bit too aggressive at first towards them on like them being on top of their stuff. I didn't necessarily want to, which was wrong on my part, like go back to their level of where they thought things should be. And I didn't want to invest a ton of time in teaching them. I was kind of like, I'd rather just get as many people in here who are really up to speed on what I want to do. And I think I kind of shortchanged some of their development just because I was a little bit impatient with them. And then secondly, I think just having that relationship, like in my role specifically, with the head football coach, to where you're like fully on board with everything they're doing, is something that I could have improved upon.
What is this? This is year 3 or 2 for you at
This
Elon?
will be my second full off season, but third year.
Isn't it absolutely incredible how much difference there is between the first year and second year, just from a standpoint of everything you're saying? Like, the players know what you expect. The coach, your assistant coaches know how you want them to coach. Like, I look back to a year ago from where we are now, it ain't even close. Like, to the things we're able to do now, where we are, from a standpoint of how we're coaching and just how much smoother a transition it is. Like, that's, to me, the biggest challenge that I didn't think would be a challenge was, like, I was at Akron for 7 years. I knew every athlete in that program. I knew their parents. I knew who recruited them. I knew every single one of their bandwidths, their movement bandwidths, their emotional bandwidths. I mean, I could name all of them. And you don't think about that until you take over.
I would
I don't
say,
know if that looks irregular.
Yeah. Sorry, you cut out for a second. I thought you stopped talking. My bad.
I never stopped talking, Nick.
Oh.
But yeah, I did. I mean, I took that for granted so much. And year two now, I'm sitting there realizing this, just like, man, just knowing athletes is so important, vitally
Yeah.
important.
And like our first year, I felt like there was times where I'm like, man, I just need to hang it up. Like I'm a shitty coach. Like I'm just not doing a good enough job. Because you come from Iowa and it's like there's one way of doing things. Every single person there had come through, as a freshman. Like you didn't inherit any of these classes where it's like, oh, they'd never been accustomed to our way. And you're so used to everything just running smoothly and you onboard people, it's smooth. And like when we got our freshmen, I was like, oh, okay, this is good. Like there's one group who's like, I felt like they were a little bit further ahead than the rest of the team quicker. Um, like I don't think it's necessarily something that when you go into a director role that you can improve upon just exponentially quicker. I think it's going to take time. It's just getting yourself in the right state of mind to understand that it's not going to happen instantly. Um, and for myself, like especially year 1 to year 3 now, I would say it's just not even close from a cultural aspect too. And I'm not a big like obedience military style guy. Like I want people to do things because it's the right thing to do versus they want to do things because they're terrified of me like ripping them. Um, which I think took a little bit longer to build, but now I think we're in a really good spot because of it.
From the standpoint of your philosophy, I mean, is a lot of this similar things you guys did at Iowa? Is that kind of what got you on this more quote unquote progressive? I don't know if that's what you want to say, but quote unquote progressive model. Is this more of like things you've kind of come across by studying? But what has really been the backbone of developing your philosophy here?
I would say everything from my philosophy originally stemmed from like Mike Boyle, honestly, because my college strength coach, his college strength coach worked for Coach Doyle back in the day. Coach Doyle was an athlete and Mike Boyle was his strength coach. So everything kind of stemmed from his original stuff way back when. Um, but like, Coach Doyle is very progressive. Like when you start looking around at programs and they don't post a whole lot of stuff or like necessarily share everything that they do, but they're always trying to improve. Like even back in 2016, we started doing force plate stuff, looking at reactive strength index and individually prescribing plyometrics based off of that. He's always been super open to his staff bringing ideas. And I would say the core of my philosophy is very Coach Doyle, Mike Boyle in the weight room with Charlie Francis overview, kind of 3,000-foot view of everything. I believe in from like a high-low structure would change a little bit. And then just kind of always pushing the envelope. Most of the things have been just me experimenting or my staff experimenting. As far as in the weight room, we're probably very similar to Coach Doyle because he's really progressive in that stuff. I would say our biggest difference might be on the field stuff. We're a little bit more progressive, so to speak. Definitely not like your cookie cutter type approach on the field.
What is your programming style like as far as how far ahead in advance will you write a program, and then how much are you adapting that program as you go in day and day, week by week, month by month?
Yeah, so like that outline I sent you, we had that together probably early December of kind of here's what we want to do. We're mapping out our summer outline right now, but we have kind of all the entire spring mapped out. But as far as we'll make quite a few adjustments, but it's not going to be like a wholesale change. It's usually just minor things that we might tinker, things of that nature. But we'll only print cards 2 weeks at a time. That way, if we want to change something, we can. And then we print out our on-field card kind of week by week. And then the summer, it's a little bit easier because all we have here is football and basketball. So our staff will run a week ahead of schedule. So we'll do week 1, the week before, week 2. So if we see a hiccup ourselves, we'll kind of make changes as we go.
This is a kind of not necessarily off topic, but I was looking at this, and I'm asking this because I'm currently designing a new weight room. You guys have a ramp, or where do you guys do these ramp sprints?
So we just do it by the research we have. Coming up from our field, there's probably like a 35, 40 degree incline that stretches out about like 45 yards. And that would be like our steep ramp. And then we have another one on the backside. And luckily for us, both of them are within 100 yards of our weight room. And this one's probably like about 40, 50 yards long, but it's only like a 15, 20 degree incline at most. So it's a nice gradual ramp.
What do you all like? Do you like that? I mean, because right now our architects have ours at 33 degrees, and I'm like, man, that just seems too steep for me. But you don't have an issue with that 35 to 40 degree. You like it?
I like it for like, I just believe in like kind of earning the right to sprint. Like if you come back week 1 and you're doing flat ground flies of any sort, you're going to have issues.
Right.
So we'll start at 33, 30 or 35 to 40, whatever it may be. The first week to where we can get upright running mechanics and it slows the velocity enough that you don't have issues. And then we bring it down the next week and then we go flat ground. So it's really just a progression. I don't know if I was building a weight room, what I would do necessarily. But I do like it, especially it's, if you want to do like resisted sprinting, you could just run up the hill and get somewhat closer or realistic benefits without as much like setup.
Yeah, well, I love it for exactly what you said is it's a great way to sub-maximally sprint. I think from a standpoint of coming back from return to play stuff with injured guys, I think starting on a steep ramp is a great way to do it. But try to get the tough thing is when you're building one ramp and one ramp only, you got to try to find the angle that everyone's going to be able to use the most, or else it ends up just being a very expensive thing to look at.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I would try and make it like a 2-angled ramp and just have one that like eventually tears up afterwards to where you could have 2 different levels. Because the most people that we can fit on ours is like 4 people wide. But if you're doing speed work, you're doing a full recovery anyway. So it's not super imperative that you get 100 dudes up at a time.
Yeah. So just, I haven't had, like I said, I didn't have a ton of time to look through this completely, but kind of just mentally walk me through with your sprint outline. How do you progress that? And then how do you program it? Do you have, are you programming based off force vectors? Do you have a horizontal day and a vertical day? Are you constantly training both? Sprint volume, what do you think is appropriate? Are you micro dosing daily trying to get the optimal load, or are you how do you go through all those things?
Yeah, so we'll have a kind of singular focus each day, which is something that's been new this year and I've liked a lot more than last year. Last year we would do a 2 high approach and just go Tuesday, Friday. But then we were trying to do it just felt like we were trying to do too many things in one session. And I didn't think we got enough volume overall.
Give me an example, if you don't mind, of that. Like what made you feel like that? What were you doing, and why did you feel like it was too much, or too much?
As far as I just like having one kind of clear focus for a day. So say we go through a max velocity complex, and it's like, okay, now let's break up and do a little bit of change of direction and agility. And then the other day it was acceleration, and then we break up and do a little bit of change direction, agility. Versus this year, we're going 3 high approach. And so we have a max velocity day, we have an acceleration day, we have an agility day. And it's just, it feels a lot cleaner kind of having that focus of just one thing. And it just gives us more time on the field. I think most people spend too much time in the weight room in general and not enough on the field. So it still keeps that kind of high-low structure, but it just gets us out on the field a lot more often.
You just got Coach Sleep very excited by saying too many guys spend time in the weight room.
Way too much time. It's not even close.
To me, moving is king. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Nick. I think that I've always, since I've kind of flipped to really, I think having a decent idea of doing what I'm doing is we've been vector specific, or we keep agility days, maximum velocity, and we pair our plyometrics even with that. So we'll do more vertical plyometrics, reactive plyometrics on max velocity. But I think from a standpoint of like you learn this with your pro day guys, right? You're trying to teach a forward cross step for the 5-10-5. If you do a karaoke right before it, that step probably ain't going to go so well. So things like if you're trying to constantly work, if you're trying to really improve max velocity mechanics, but then you're doing heavy ass sled sprints and you're putting them in an acceleration phase and then trying to get them up right in the wickets, and you're just doing a lot and asking that body to do a lot in one day, where I think they have enough exposure to having to, on days like that, they're doing 7-on-7 and like, I know you do the games, all the different reactive games, and there's pieces of that. They're having enough exposure to having to be working in multiple vectors, and that I think it's fine for us to focus and hone in on one vector specifically. With that, so break that down then for me. So what day will you do max velocity,
Yep.
or horizontal vectors versus
Mhm.
vertical vectors versus change of direction? How's that pair with your weight room stuff?
Yeah. So in the winter, even our advanced guys who I think are strong enough will still do like kind of a modified triphasic block, where just from a tissue resiliency standpoint, I think is important. So we'll go max velocity on Monday, just because I'll preface by, in the summer it would be acceleration on Monday, low day on Tuesday with upper body and some tempo runs. Wednesday would be max velocity. Thursday would be upper body work only, and mobility and stuff like that. And then Friday would be an agility, like games oriented day with some resilience work post, but not a true like lift. Um, and on those days, that Monday would be a little bit more of everything is kind of more of a speed strength range, but Monday is definitely a more dynamic day to prep them for Wednesday, essentially. And anytime we do max velocity, similar to what you said, we're doing our vertical plyometrics on that day. When we do acceleration, we hit more horizontal plyometrics on that day. Our medicine ball throws are all horizontal in nature. Even as far as like loading, like the main movement on the acceleration day might just be a heavy prowler for 10 yards, loaded up as heavy as you can go. Our max velocity days might be more of a split squat, trap bar deadlift, etc. Probably more RDLs on that horizontal day. Try and keep it somewhat vector specific. In the winter, we go max velocity on Monday, just because I feel like if you're hitting some sort of heavier strength work, especially eccentrics, isometrics on a Monday, you just might have a little bit too much residual fatigue on a Wednesday to go max velo. So we go max velocity Monday, Wednesday acceleration, and Friday agility. As far as like microdose or optimal dose, whatever it may be, it's definitely not microdosed because we're only out there 3 days. So on the field, we're about 45 minutes plus each day, 45 to an hour. On the agility day on Friday, we're out there about an hour and a half just on field. And then on Monday, kind of my goal is a short to long, earn the right to sprint with the steeper, bring it down. And then the goal is to kind of create a buffer of high speed distance for practice as well. It's not only we want them to get fast, improve speed reserve, but if I can sustainably, because I know a football practice is not the most sustainable or safe necessarily, but it's what the coaches kind of want to do. But so for me, if I'm out there 45 to an hour and I can safely, full recovery, get in 400 plus yards of high speed sprinting, that's really high quality, I think that has a huge impact as far as keeping injuries down as well. Acceleration, rough volume wise, I'd say each acceleration session is definitely 150 to like 200 yard range. Nothing super excessive, but not microdose necessarily. And then the agility days, we just break it up into a mirror category, a chaser category, and a score category. And we'll do each one for, depends on the amount of time we have. Say we'll spend 5 to 8 minutes on at least each category, and each position group might have their own progressions within it. But so in total, about 30 minutes ish, 25, 30 of just those 3 categories. And then we'll go into some sort of like small sided games in a bigger group team setting for the remaining time, and then hit some more intensive tempos on the back end again.
It reminds me, and then, you were talking about kind of specifying plyometrics earlier. And one thing I talk to Cam about all the time is like, I think by trying to work position specific, and I know that's been like a recent fad, probably within the last 10 to whatever, 15 years. But to me, it's less about being position specific as far as O-line, D-line, wide receiver, corner, and it's more about deficiency specific.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do there need, does a big boy 320 pound offensive tackle need to run 40-yard sprints every day? No, he doesn't. But to me, it's like, okay, you take those RSIs that you run, right? Or even just, flying 10. If a guy has a great accelerator, his 10-yard split is indicative of a 4.40, but is flying 10 from 30 to 40 yards is indicative of a 4.8. Well, that dude is very reactively deficient.
Yes.
And so instead of worrying about what position that guy plays and then sticking him in that group and saying, hey, you're just going to do that, he needs to be trained deficiently specific. That guy needs to be doing more hurdle hops, pogo hops, and whereas a guy who maybe is accelerative deficient needs to do more seated box jumps and things with more ground contact time. What do you guys, or how will you kind of RSI guys? How do you specify plyos within those groups and everything?
Yeah, so like on a max velocity day and acceleration day, everyone is virtually doing the exact same thing from a sprint standpoint, except our volumes are down for the line guys. Like if we're doing a 30-yard lead in, 10-yard fly, the furthest I take out our line guys is like 20, 25 yards, just because I don't think anything past that's necessary. But generally the group is doing that. And then within the weight room, we can specify plyos based off of more reactive or more overcoming inertia plyos based off kind of what they need. But as far as how we track it, we don't have like contact grid or anything like that, do a true RSI test. And I just don't think it's as specific as actually running. So we time from 10 to a 10-yard fly with a 10-yard buildup, 10-yard fly with a 15, 20, and then we go out to 30 yards. And we have all those times and just go look at the numbers and see where guys fall. And we just put it in a radar graph. And then with that, we'll look at like a more acceleration one and more. We have one that's horizontal, one's vertical, and I can just send you a copy, but it'd be a radar graph of heavy load to highest speed and just see where they're plotted amongst everyone else at their position group within each test. So this guy's great at his horizontal stuff everywhere. His vertical stuff, he's seriously lacking in anything that's reactive. He might do a little bit more reactive vertical stuff within his plyometric work. But just trying to see clearly kind of where they're deficient across that load velocity of horizontal and vertical. And I think if you have good programming, you should be addressing all of it anyway. But especially in the summer, we'll try and be as specific as we can from a deficiency standpoint, and more paint by numbers in the winter when we're a little bit more globally interested in moving things forward.
I think we could probably trade chairs pretty easily and not skip a beat there, Coach. I mean, that's very specific. That's very close to similar concept. I just think the big thing to take away from that is like people who, for example, reactive strength index is what we're talking about, RSI. People hear that and they're like, oh, we can't afford that technology. Like, you don't need it. You can still understand the concept. And it's like I said, the two favorite ways I like to do it is, one is what I just told you. If you look at a guy's 10-yard or 20-yard split, and then you look at his flying 10, you can see discrepancies very quickly, and you don't need to have a giant brain to figure out what they're deficient in. Mm-hmm. And then what we use is we just create a formula with the jump mats, and we do a static jump, we do a counter movement jump, and we do an overloaded counter movement jump. And we created a formula that for us works, that we know that if there is, if there's 2 inches discrepancy here or there, that means this guy is muscular strength deficient, or that guy is, and that works for us. And we can do that very efficiently and very effectively. You don't need to have this app, or you don't need to have a $10,000 piece of equipment to do that. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't understand what RSI is or how it can be valuable to you.
You mind if I take this call just real quick? Sorry.
Please do. We can cut it out. But we'll microdose probably a little more than what you have here. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes we run into problems because you still have accumulated fatigue, and by Friday when we try to sprint, sometimes that doesn't always go well. So I think there's issues kind of both ways. Sometimes it's definitely, I like it because to me it's a little more fluid and organic, and that's just how I like to coach. Yeah. I like to screen athletes daily and say, hey, maybe we monitor this and cut this out and adjust this and work on this. And it's funny because in the next breath, I'm the guy that literally writes an entire year's program out at one time. And then goes back once a month or once every 2 weeks and looks at it and changes. That's just how my brain works with it. But anyways, so just sprint volume. The one thing I really want to hit, or at least get your opinion and perspective on, is what do you think are appropriate sprint volumes, or I don't want to say the minimal dosage, but what do you think is kind of that minimal where you're like, man, I really think this is a good amount, or what do your sprint days kind of look like where you're like, that's what I would say, we get that accomplished, I feel good about what we've done. And then the other end, where you like, this is the diminishing point of returns where you don't need to go past this. That's kind of the point where you go past that. Now you're talking about 72 hours of really needing good recovery and, really get into that point.
I mean, minimal effective dose, like Tony Holler has dudes run like 2 lead in 10-yard like builds and then run 40 yards, I think. And he gets dudes really freaking fast. I definitely believe in minimum effective dose, and I've probably done that more so than not in my career. If you're running 10 yards on an acceleration day, I think if you did, I don't know, 4 sets of 10 yards with heavy chains, or you did one, like my personal favorite on acceleration days, just from setup standpoint, is start them in a bunch of variable positions. I hit the whistle, they race through 10, we get the winner's points. And
Did
just
somebody
max
send you
effort.
my program before we did this today?
I just like high intent. Like if you want people to run fast, time it, make them race, or have an NFL scout there. And I can't control the third variable, so I just want them to race or compete against a timer.
There's no doubt. I'm now, like, there's technical proficiency we want to see sometimes. So we might,
sure.
if we're doing a chain station and we want to get, 4 is about same thing. I agree, is about the wheelhouse for each kind of. If we're doing chain sprints, we're typically going to work about 4 of them. I'll typically, like waterfall start the first one so I can watch each rep. The second rep, probably the same thing, and then the next 2 reps, I'm grouping them into groups of 3. And I got a stopwatch out, and I'm only clocking the fastest guy. So there's one winner and there's one time screamed out. And so then they're competing and they're sprinting. So I think to me, it's like, are you really sprinting if there's not a watch out there? And I honestly, I think part of it is it's subconscious even, because I'll tell you, like, if I go out and sprint, okay, me and you went out and sprinted tomorrow and we were just, whatever, running flying 10s, we're just running them. Yeah, and then we did it again the following week, and there were lasers out there. I bet your ass $1,000 that we'd be 10 times more sore from doing it the day that the clock's out there.
Without doubt.
It could be subconscious, but to me, you're not really sprinting unless, you're not really sprinting unless there is either competition or a laser out there.
Yep. And from like on our high speed days, when I say we're getting 400 yards, like, and this is our bigger days, if we're getting 400 yards of high speed distance, a lot of that is just, I want to accrue volume with technical proficiency at like the 85-90% range and get guys to run well, whether that's like a PVC run, which is something that I stole from Cam Jost. Like, he did it with a med ball, we just do it with the PVC. Or like speed gate golf that I stole from Sam Portland, where it's, hey,
What is that?
For simplicity, I'm terrible at math, but let's just say, we're going to run a 10-yard lead in, and then you're going to run 40 yards at 90%. Based off of your 10 to 10-yard fly, I'm just going to multiply it by 4 and find 85%, for example. I want them to run as close to that time as possible with perfect technical proficiency. So we're running at 85%, and we have lasers out, which is the idea that I stole from Sam Portland in that podcast. I think it was on Just Fly podcast. Because he did it, because like every time he brought up the lasers, he felt like people were blowing hamstrings because they just changed gears, and he wanted them to just, from a psychological standpoint, to get accustomed to them and still run technically well. So he started by doing like A skips and shit through the lasers to like mentally prepare them for it.
I respect it.
Yeah. But I just think that you need to understand your gears and like, what is 85%? What is 90%? I think there's a lot of value to that, one. And then I just think you're going to get in better technical work And then the reality is they're never going to run as fast as they do on a 30-yard lead-in, 10-yard timed on the lasers on the football field. So we're hitting closer to the speeds that they'll hit on the field just because there's always that kind of perception action element to it. There's the ball. There's so many variables. They're in full pads, helmets. So you're hitting close to their top-end game speed anyway at that. But it just allows you to build volume safely. And that is more so just to prepare them for practice, not so much to prepare them for being faster, although I do think it has a good carryover to it. So on those days, we will only hit 1 or 2 reps where it's a true max velocity lead in. Or true max velocity, like they lead in and then hammer as hard as they can for that 10-yard fly.
Yeah, we one thing we've done is like we'll auto regulate everything. So 2 is always my goal. Like I want to get at least 2 on those.
Mm-hmm.
4 is where we'll cap it. But it's auto regulated in the sense that if whatever we'll progress this in, but your cutoff rate might be 98%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you run the first rep, we have your cutoff number on the on the sheet with me. So
Mm-hmm.
you run past and you're under your cutoff, then you're done. Like you're done sprinting. I know you're not, for whatever it is. I'm not going to risk taking it. Now that being said, if you beat your first rep, and you PR, same thing. Typically, if you PR, I'm like, dude, you're good. You PR,
Yeah.
like let's we got faster today. Let's call it a win. But if you're just kind of consistently running at that speed and you can go 3 or 4 reps, like I'll let them go. But that I'd say that's been wildly helpful with both of those things. Of one, you PR, you're good, man. Like that's a win today. Let's move on. No point in trying to PR again and either not or getting hurt.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, you drop underneath your cutoff, and we'll progress that too. So it starts off as a 95% cutoff, and then it works out as we get closer, like a 98% cutoff. So we're just trying to really wean them into building that resiliency. But I think that's important. I agree with what you said about, like what velocities are they going to really primarily be hitting, and very rarely will they be hitting that. But I think from a standpoint of like limb reorganization, I just think putting them, I like to put athletes in worst case scenarios so that when they do get to the field. So I really like that actually, and probably something I'll steal and maybe kind of adjust our program a little bit too, because I think that's a really good point. But yeah, I think just that ability to force them to really learn how to reorganize their limbs at those velocities. I'd rather have the first time they do it be, in summer than.
Exactly. And most people are so terrified to run like max velocity in training. But if you do it safely, like in the past 2 years, we've had, 30-yard build up, 10-yard fly, and we've had 1 hamstring in all of our max velocity training days. And it was because a kid like lunged for the line like an idiot.
Yeah.
But I really like that auto-regulated standpoint of yours. Like that, we want to build a safety net from a high-speed yardage standpoint, because I think that's probably the number one predictor of guys coming in and getting hurt is they're not used to that kind of volume at high speed. And then 2, we just want, if we don't get them to run their fastest time ever with us and shorts and lasers out, to build that kind of safety net too of, like you said, reorganizing and just running your fastest speed ever. If they're running faster in a game, we probably didn't do a good enough job in the off season.
What does your day look like after your highest volume sprint day? What do you do the day after?
Day after, we do an upper body lift and we do tempo runs at 70 to 75% tempo.
This is the big thing that I can guiltily, I don't know if that's a word, guiltily say that I wish I would have done better, but I just started doing it, and I'm glad I am. Is like I'm letting I've always been the clock guy, I've always been the like don't miss your time, But the thing is when I got a freaking whistle in my mouth and I'm screaming numbers the whole time, I'm not coaching.
Yeah.
So I've been having these guys run the clock and run the whistle, and I've been coaching the shit out of tempo runs this year, and It's fantastic. So like, hey, you got a 60-yard tempo run. We're trying to get extensive. We're like 75% speed. You're going to come out and you're going to accelerate with great mechanics for 10 yards as hard as you can. And then I want you upright, and I want you holding that over the knee dribble position, and I want you to hold that for the next 50. and I'm freaking on their ass like the whole time I'm coaching it, and these dudes are looking at me and they're freaking like gassed. They're like they're feeling it in ways they've never felt before because it's endurance. Like they're having to hold those mechanics now where normally guys get fatigued at 30 and they start going back. Think about how much robustness and resiliency we're building from just being forced in that position for whatever we do. We do 4 sets of 6. That's a lot of exposure to that. You know what I mean? And so that's something that I really liked, and I think they really haven't liked it, because it's like kicking their ass. But that's one thing that I'm like, man, like if we're gonna run at 75% speed, because we take them just like I think I saw you do, is we create those times off their 40s. So dude, this is 75% of your speed.
Exactly.
If you can't hold those mechanics at 75% speed, how in the hell are you gonna do it at anything above that? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm at the point now where I'm going to really start preaching, like, own your technique, own, like, we talk about body weight chin ups and dips and stuff, like, own your body weight, own your technique. If you can't own 75% of your max velocity speed, but you want to be fast, come on, man.
Exactly. And that, like, the point I always use on those days is like, say we're covering 3,000 yards of distance today, like make those 3,000 yards perfect, because every single one of those guys that thinks he's an NFL guy will come to you when it's pro day time, be like, Coach, how do I get my 40 down in 6 weeks? We've had 4 years a year 40 down by being technically perfect in all of these and maximally sprinting every time we maximally sprint. But I think tempo runs are immensely valuable because it truly is a low day on the nervous system. But from a structural standpoint, you can get a lot done from the lower limb, and just building your volume in that aerobic base. Anecdotally, just from what I've seen, the guys with the most, not the best mile runner time, the guy with the best football idea of aerobic base are the guys that are least injured. They'll go through a hard practice. Their GPS is off the charts. You ask for their RPE. They're like, maybe a 4. You ask the other guy, he's like a 10 because he's in shitty aerobic shape. And he comes back the next day, does the exact same thing. When you're like, oh, you should be careful. But really, those guys are perfectly fine. They just recover so much faster.
We certainly do a great job of overcomplicating things all the time, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, if I were to really analyze one trend in my career, is that the best movers, like the best athletes, right? Like the guys that just move well, single leg RDL, bilateral RDL, hip hinge, single leg squat, front squat, the guys that move well doing those things, run with good mechanics, and have great GPP, like you're saying, those are the guys that just don't get hurt very often, really, in any form.
Exactly.
And we do such a good job of overcomplicating that. Like, I'm definitely much more of a generalist, especially, the majority of the year. But that's where we just got out of our first phase. And I told these guys going into it, our goal is just to be moving really well by spring ball. I'm not concerned about strength or speed. I think and it's called our neural ingrainment phase. I think if we really ingrain great movement pattern and these guys are moving well after the season, and we go into spring ball just moving well as our goal, everything else is going to work itself out. And obviously, what are the byproducts of that? It's speed and it's strength. And so by just emphasizing a focus on moving better, we've become stronger, we've become more explosive, we've become faster.
Yeah, I love that.
And we overlook that stuff all the time. Well, Nick, I know these guys have questions. I don't want to keep you all day here, so I'm gonna kind of let them ask some things, and then feel free to, if you have anything you want to ask me at the end. Don't feel like you can't do that either. So I'm gonna let these guys anything they have, and we'll keep on rolling. You good on time still? You okay?
I got plenty of time.
Okay. All right. Cool. What do you guys got? Go ahead.
Yeah. What's up, Coach? You kind of covered a little bit the question I wrote down while you were talking about the high velocity yards, and the number 400 you threw out just seemed really big to me in a training session. So, and you're talking about that being over 85%. Are you measuring that any other way other than what you spoke about, or is that kind of an estimate of what you're hitting in a training session, or are you guys GPS units on?
GPS. We've got 20 guys with units on, and that's kind of and that's only, we're talking week 6, week 7.
Right. Obviously, we've built to that volume.
Yeah. And that comes primarily through that speed gate golf that I was telling you about. So it might be, we get guys up and we're going to do 10 reps of a 10-yard buildup, hold for 40 at 85, 90%, but close to a full recovery. on a typical day, true high-speed distance, like if we do a max velocity complex, it might look something like a 40-yard chain sprint, which I think most people don't get people running far enough soon enough at high intent. So you can run max intent with chains behind you right away at 40 yards. It slows your velocity down. So it's, instead of short to long, long to short, it's just slow to fast. Just put the chains behind you, take off, and then we'll slowly bring the chain weight down to where it's really close to max velocity sprint. But it just gets guys geared up to run their flies better, in my opinion.
How much weight do you start off with that with your chains? Like, what do you start?
2 chains for us is like 40 some pounds, which is probably a touch heavy. But the first, guys still run with good sprint mechanics with that.
And I mean, you're doing it for regressive purposes, so it's
exactly
your why is spot on. I like that a lot. I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna steal that for next January. Just start 2-week one, because I think if anything, it makes me feel better about it. Like, even this, we did well, but there's a couple times I'm like, man, they're moving really fast with just one chain back there. Like, I kind of wish it was a little heavier.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And then you progress that down to one chain.
Yeah, like we have like big chains and then we have small chains. So we'll progress all the way down to one small chain, which is like, I don't know, 12 pounds, something like that, which is going to slow your velocity just enough that it's not max velocity, basically. But so it looks something like yesterday, for example, we did a drop-in tuck jump as like kind of like a plyo at the beginning, just to get them ramped up. They're 40-yard chain sprint with a small chain, a PVC run for guys who have mechanical issues, or everybody on their first round sometimes, just kind of play by feel. And then the guys who already run technically well, it might just be, hey, we're running 90% perfect mechanics on the way back. And so that'd be, 40 yards, 80 yards, and we're still just prepping for our fly. And then we'll hit our fly and say it's a 30-yard buildup, 10 yards timed. That would be one round, and we're over 100 yards. And then we might pair it with like a competitive depth jump on the field or vertical jump, whatever it may be. And then we'll go one cycle back through. And I like your idea of the auto regulating those fly 10s. That's definitely something I'll be taking, to where guys might get a little bit more volume or a little bit less. But I think 200 yards you can get very forwardly and sustainably through kind of that sequence. And then one other thing, jumping back a while ago, forget RSI is what we were talking about, but like the easiest test for me for like horizontal to tell if a guy is elastic or struggles is just a broad jump and then a triple broad jump that's continuous. If a guy doesn't jump further than his best broad jump on average of his 3, I would say they're not an elastic person. Like if you can use that elastic energy and cover more ground, but I don't know why I just thought of that.
Yeah, no, that's another just good example, another easy way to. I don't know, and like, personal experience, dude, I'm just like, I'm out on broad jumps. Not the fact that I don't like them. It's just, I don't know if it's I've had too many guys that like, so we do all sub-maximal broad jumps. Like it'll be like resistant band broad jump. Try to deal with the landing. Cause I just like, I don't know, too many guys I've seen just stick a broad jump and just like go straight and grab their knees. And I'm like, God, I'm just tired of seeing that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Like I said, I love the idea of it, and I see people do them, and I'm like, man, I really like that. But every time I'm like, you know what? Let's put it back in for this block. I see it, and I'm like, nope. I'm just like, it just personally, I'm like, man, it just, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's just, they get me. So we either like, we'll do a broad jump onto a mat, like a launch pad, and they'll land on the stomach, or we'll do like a resistant band broad jump, just because I'm like, I don't know. I'm just at this point, I'm just like nervous about broad jumps. I don't know. It's context. It's condition, but I love the idea of them. And that's like a super easy RSI. That's a really good point. It's a really easy takeaway from this is do that. And you can know pretty much if guys are elastic or not.
Mm-hmm. I literally wrote that down on my notes, said cheap way to do RSI.
Yep. Seriously, it's great.
Coach, I got a question for you. Apologies if this might have been covered while I was out, but we talked a lot about like the whole speed exposure stuff. What kind of direct, let's say, hamstring work are you guys doing in terms of like you guys, implement a lot of the eccentric Nordic stuff, end range isos, things like that. How does that kind of integrate within the program?
Yeah, I think everyone tries to play like one camp because that JB
awesome.
Mervin has been reinforcing that thing. Like, if you sprint fast, that's the most resilient thing you can do for the hamstrings, which I agree with. But why not do everything possible to make your hamstrings robust? So we'll do on Fridays when the week is kind of over after our agility stuff, we do Copenhagen's and we do Nordics and we do sled drags, just kind of from a hip girdle, groin, hamstring resilience standpoint. At the end of the week, they got plenty of time to recover. And we do a partner glute ham raise. So like your hips stay stacked on top of your knees and you just bring your head down to the ground. So like proximal end hamstring.
Yeah.
And then we'll go a razor curl. So flex of the hips, go straight out. And then we'll do a Nordic and we'll do a sequence of, I don't know how many reps. The most we ever do is like 3 reps of each, which I would say is probably high volume for something that hard, personally. But then on Wednesdays or Mondays, we'll do some sort of hamstring. Like hamstring pale rail is one that we've done a lot of, that I like. Lying banded tantrums or like a single leg glute ham iso. But I mean, if you're doing single leg hinge, you do single leg squats. Like, I think you're doing a lot of hamstring work indirectly anyway. And then you sprint. I like doing the razor curl Nordic glute ham raise combo at the end of the week, though. I think if there's research that says it's valuable and it's not going to take away from your training, I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, it's like you said, I feel like a lot of people feel like they got to pick one or the other. And as you alluded to, if you do a little bit of everything, you're probably going to get the best results from it,
Yeah, I mean, if you have really strong hamstrings, the incidence that, like, there's some Lackland-Womit thing I saw a long time ago. Is basically like, if the number one predictor of injury is previous injury, and then number 2 is just hamstring strength. And I think it was if you got to like above 400 or 500 newtons, I think it was 400 on a Nord board. If you had previous hamstring injury versus no previous injury, your chance of being injured was the exact same if you were at that point on the continuum. So just get really strong fucking hamstrings.
I definitely, to what you said right in the beginning, is I definitely think we do way too much. I don't see a lot of programs that don't do enough posterior chain work in the weight room. I just see a lot of programs that don't do enough sprinting on the field.
Yes.
And to me, I asked my staff, we did a curriculum episode just in-house last week. We just went over all things speed. And I asked them, I said, if I could pick one hamstring movement and I was only allowed to do one, what do you guys think I would pick? And, guys were like, eccentrics, single leg RDLs, all the stuff that we do. And, I said, no, it'd be sprinting. We'd sprint. That would be the one hamstring exercise that we do. And I can think of a lot of, times in my career where I really emphasized what we did in the weight room hamstring wise and probably didn't do nearly as good of a job on the field as what I think we currently do. And we had muscular injuries. I think the more we've built volume, the more we've built robustness and resilience on the field, and the less we've done in the weight room, the better. Like, to what you just said too, like, with our glute ham or our any glute ham like we do, or any like Nordic hamstring curl we do, we just talked about this yesterday, is like, do you need to progress volume in that? Like, is there a minimal dose, which for us is 3 reps, and we don't really ever progress over that.
Yeah, we do the same thing every week.
Yeah, do we need to go to 4? Do we need to go to 5 and then sit? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think instead, what you have left, you add it on the field. You get more volume in sprinting. We just had this conversation yesterday. I think that's where we miss it. Like, where guys are like, I definitely believe that you need to have a lot of maximal strength in those hamstrings. Like, I think heavy RDLs are pivotal. I'm a huge believer in being able to do a heavy barbell RDL and a heavy single leg barbell RDL, just to have some strength and some mass in those hamstrings. But after that, man, like, I don't know. Like, do eccentric hamstrings work? I don't know. You read Franz Bosch and he thinks everything's isometric, and that's I respect that too. But I'll tell you, just personally, from my experience, I think sprinting is the thing. I think if you have strong hamstrings and you work, like you said, if you're single leg squatting off of a box, you got pretty strong hamstrings. If you're doing that with a load and you're working some good posterior chain, if you can RDL pretty heavy and you can sprint, like to me, that's it. And I think there's enough research on eccentrics that we're going to do them, because I know they're not going to hurt. But we're like 3x3. The most volume we ever get is 4 sets of 3. That's the most we do all year long. But other than that, we focus on all the stuff sprint wise on the field, and we didn't have one muscular skeletal injury, one hamstring injury last season. Like we had nothing, which is obviously the point is just not necessarily. I don't think there's anything no such thing as overtraining. I think it's just underprepared. You're underprepared for whatever you were trying to do on that particular day, and I think a lot of that comes from speed work, not necessarily from strength work all the time.
For sure. Everyone does strength work all off season and thinks that's where they're like changing things. But then most of the teams I've seen that care about strength work a ton, their first practice, there's like 4 dudes out with a hamstring instantly because they only run 10 yards because that's safe versus as soon as they go to practice, 10 yards, there's no cutoff of you can't go past there. It's not safe. So why wouldn't you prepare them when you can safely versus when they get into practice?
Yeah, no doubt, 100%. Well, Coach, I know we've had obviously a conversation, but is there anything specific you'd like to know about our program or anything that I can answer for you?
Yeah, I was curious. So I went and visited Brian Hess last week. I'm curious how you set up your coaches kind of on the floor. Like you mentioned, you have them leading like a tempo run, something like that. Say you're doing a speed session, kind of how do you break things up team-wise and coach-wise? And then if you're on the floor, how do you break things up?
Yeah, so this is, a year 2 thing. Like we couldn't have done this year 1 just because the coaches that I had didn't know the program very well yet, which isn't anything against them. They were just trying to figure it all out. So you had to coach and teach kind of all at the same time. I believe that if, like I said, if I'm directing tempo and I'm the one going, all right, we got A skips, all right, we got ankle hops, all right, we got ankle drip. If I'm constantly doing that, I'm not able to watch and coach as well as I can. So what it is now is I would say these guys, they really run most things. So I can actually watch and coach and really, screen and, assess and do those kind of things. So typically, either, one of them will, like we have 3 groups a day. I'll have, pretty much each one of us typically will lead each one of those groups. And by lead, I mean, all right, first, we got back squats. Here's what we got. I got the whistle on the first set, or like I said, on the field. All right, here we go. A skips ready. They're leading the workout. And typically, we'll break that up to where a different coach is leading each group. So they're learning what it's like to run and lead a group. Now we're at the point now to where, with our last group, I really want to watch these guys and I want to assess where we're at and I want to screen as much as I can. So really, I've had Heiss really lead that group now too, and I'm just freaking walking around coaching because I can see everything like that. And I really, really prefer that, honestly. I prefer to manage. I prefer to be able to just see as much as I can. And if I'm, like I said, if I'm sitting there blowing a whistle or, there's tempo, there's time constrictions. So if I see something, but I got to blow the next whistle for the next thing we got, well, now if Heiss is leading it, he can blow the whistle. I can pull that guy aside and I can correct him, on the side. So that's definitely where I've shifted to now. Were we doing that a year ago? No, but that's where, I would say if I was in a situation where I had 5 full-time or 4 full-time assistants at a Power 5 university, I probably wouldn't quote unquote lead much. I would be, my assistants would be the guys with the whistles. They'd be the guys with the stopwatches. And I would be the guy that's really monitoring. Now we'll split in the stations right on the field. So we'll have on our horizontal vector days, we'll have a force projection, a force production, and a plyometric station. The day of the week when we're doing like lasers and we're timing, we're doing time 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s as we progress through the year. I'll always stay at that station just so we have a consistent timer. So that those times there's more validity to them. So one day a week, I'll stay at that max velocity or that max speed station, that force production station. And then the other sprint day of the week, we'll all move with our groups. Okay. So one day a week, I get to see everybody sprint. one day a week you're staying with your guys that are in your racks and moving around with them. So we vary it a little bit so that I want everybody to get a chance to see everybody. And then at the same time, I want them to get a chance to kind of move with their group who you know more about their bandwidths and all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we break it up.
If you I don't know, within, I would say the last year, maybe even a little bit further, what's the biggest change that you've made to your program?
From a standpoint of actually programming and those kinds of things, or just we're year two, we're much more into you take over a program to me, and me and Coach Lou we have different philosophies, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's some things that I didn't think we did very well, but there were some things that we did very proficiently. Now, some of those things that we did proficiently aren't things that I like to do, but I know we can do those things well. Why would we not do them to continue to build strength and as I start to teach them my program? So I'd say last year some things were very hybrid in nature of it was, I took the things that I came in here and knew we did really well already, and I kept those as part of the program, even though that might not be typical of what I believe in. And then I started gradually changing everything else to where year two now it's our program. It's top to bottom. It's what we do, and it's you're kind of out of that hybrid stage of really, transitioning, and I just don't think it's fair. Like you're telling me you got a 5th-year senior who's got a 525-pound bench and squat, but you don't think he moves quite well enough. So you're going to be the hard ass that walks into that program and says, nobody's putting a weight on until you can do the bar and this. And then you got a 5th-year senior squatting the bar for 4 weeks. Like, to me, I get it and I understand. And if you want to do that, I respect it. But to me, I would never want to be that 5th-year senior that some new strength coach comes in and goes, hey, you might be strong as shit in these things, but I'm going to break you back down to the bare bones. So just kind of probably year one to year two has just gone from being kind of hybrid to really slow playing it and really slowly implementing our program to where this year now, I mean, we're in it. Like, they know it, we're doing it. This is the beginning of the full, insertion of our program.
Yep. Awesome. That's all the questions I got for you.
No, that's good, man. I really think this was a awesome episode here. I mean, a ton of takeaways for people, and I know I'm speaking for you right now, Coach, but if anybody has any questions about what I said or what Coach said, it seems like, we'd definitely be happy to help you guys any way we can. So reach out, and if you had questions about, what we were talking about or a couple things went over your head, just reach out and let us know. But there is a lot of really, really good things here. And like I said, Coach, it's if you traded our programs out for each other, you'd see a lot of similarities. And I've watched it from afar for a long time, and I really respect what you do. I think you do a really, really good job, and your willingness to share. Anytime I get a coach on here that's really willing to share as much as you are, I just try to commend you, and I hope it motivates more people to do so. I don't think there's any such thing as a secret sauce, that's going to make, that big of a difference to where we can't share things with each other. And at the end of the day, if we're making our programs better, our opportunities for our kids to grow and get better, that's what our purpose here is. So I'm all about sharing, but I really, really appreciate your transparency, Coach. I think that's unbelievable. And that's one of the things I respect most about you. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking your time. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to keeping this thing going.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, Coach.